The glass walls of my office might as well have been prison bars. 23rd floor, corner view of the harbor, mahogany desk that cost more than most people's cars, and none of it meant a thing when Callum Torven wanted to remind you who really owned your life. I'm Zane Merrinor, corporate strategist, single father of 3, and apparently today's entertainment for the mahogany mafia that runs Torven Industries. The intercom buzzed with that particular tone that meant trouble was walking through my door in a $1,000 suit. Zane. Callum didn't knock. Never did. 58 years old, silver hair perfectly styled, carrying a leather portfolio like it contained the secrets of the universe. In his world, it probably did. We need to discuss your future here. I leaned back in my chair, studying his face. Callum had that look, the one predators get when they're about to pounce on something wounded. Problem was, I wasn't as wounded as he thought. My future's looking pretty solid from where I sit, I said. The Henderson account alone brought in $12 million this quarter. About that. He opened the portfolio, sliding a contract across my desk. The paper was expensive, cream-colored, with the kind of weight that meant serious business. We're restructuring your compensation package. I picked up the contract, scanning the numbers. Then I read them again, slower this time, making sure I wasn't seeing things. The number at the bottom made my stomach clench like a fist. 68% pay cut. I set the papers down carefully, keeping my voice level. That's quite a restructure. Callum's smile was all teeth, no warmth. The board feels your performance has been adequate, but we need to trim expenses. You understand? Adequate. 3 years of pulling this company out of the red, of building client relationships that kept the lights on, of working 18-hour days while raising 3 kids alone. And I was adequate. I'll need 24 hours to consider this, I said. Of course. He stood, straightening his tie. Though I should mention Zane, single fathers have a lot of responsibilities. Mouths to feed, college funds to think about. Sometimes pride is a luxury we can't afford. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Take the cut, or lose everything. Callum gathered his papers, leaving the contract on my desk like a coiled snake. Have a good evening, Zane. Give my regards to the children. After he left, I sat there staring at that contract. The numbers blurred together as I thought about Riley's piano lessons, about Jake's soccer cleats that were already too small, about Emma's science camp application sitting on my kitchen counter. 68%. We'd lose the house within 6 months. But something else bothered me more than the money. The way Callum had smiled like he was enjoying this, like it was personal. My phone buzzed. Text from Riley. Dad, can you make it to my concert Thursday? Mom said she might come, but I haven't heard from her. Mom. Tess. My ex-wife, who'd walked out 2 years ago claiming she needed to find herself, but somehow found her way into a luxury condo downtown and a wardrobe that cost more than my annual salary. Tess, who was Callum's precious daughter, his little princess, who could do no wrong. I drove home through the gray October evening, my mind churning. The house was a modest colonial in a decent neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. The kids were at after-school programs, giving me time to think. In the laundry room, sorting through the week's washing, I found something that made me freeze. A scarf, silk, designer label, definitely not mine, and definitely not something I'd bought for any of the kids. The fabric was still faintly perfumed with an expensive fragrance I didn't recognize. Underneath that, something else. Cologne. Masculine, musky, unfamiliar. I held the scarf up to the light, studying it. Tess had been here recently. She still had a key for picking up the kids, but she'd never left anything behind before. Too careful, too controlled, unless she'd been distracted, unless she hadn't been alone. The pieces started clicking together in my mind. Callum's personal interest in destroying me, Tess's mysterious income source, the way she'd been pushing for more custody lately, claiming I was unstable because of work stress. My phone rang, Riley's name on the screen. "Hey, sweetheart." "Dad, you sound weird. Everything okay?" I looked at the scarf in my hand, then at the contract sitting on the kitchen counter. "Everything's fine, baby. Just thinking about work stuff. Is Mom coming to my concert?" The hope in her voice twisted something in my chest. Riley was 12, old enough to understand that her mother's promises didn't mean much anymore, but young enough to keep hoping. "I don't know, honey, but I'll be there. Front row, like always." "I know you will." Her voice was soft, trusting. "Dad, I love you. I love you too, Riley. More than you know." After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at that scarf. Tess thought she was so clever, so untouchable. Daddy's little girl, protected by money and influence, free to play her games while I struggled to keep our family together. But she'd made a mistake. Left evidence. And if there was one thing my years in corporate strategy had taught me, it was how to turn a mistake into an opportunity. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Victor Hale, CEO of Meridian Corp, Torven Industries' biggest competitor. We'd worked together years ago before I'd made the mistake of marrying into the Torven family. The phone rang twice before he answered. "Zane Merrinor, this is a surprise." "Victor, I hope I'm not calling too late." "Never too late for an old friend. What can I do for you?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision settling on my shoulders. "I think it's time we had that conversation about me coming to work for you." His pause was brief, but I caught the interest in his voice when he spoke again. "I'm listening." "Not over the phone. Can we meet tomorrow?" "My office, 9 a.m. "Perfect." I looked at the scarf again, at the contract, at the photo of my kids on the refrigerator. "Victor, this conversation never happened." "What conversation?" I smiled for the first time all day. "Exactly." The next morning, I drove across town to Meridian Corp's headquarters, a sleek glass tower that rivaled Torven Industries in everything except arrogance. Victor's office was on the 40th floor, with a view that made my corner office look like a closet. Victor Hale was everything Callum wasn't: self-made, sharp as a razor, and honest about being ruthless. He'd built Meridian from nothing into a major player, and he'd done it by being smarter and faster than everyone else. "You look like hell," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Thanks. You always were a charmer." He poured 2 cups of coffee from an expensive machine, black for both of us. "So, Callum finally pushed too far? You could say that?" I pulled out my phone, showing him a photo of the contract. 68% pay cut. Effective immediately. Victor whistled low. "That's not restructuring, that's warfare. Personal warfare. This isn't about money or performance. This is about putting me in my place." "And where exactly is your place, according to Callum?" "Under his thumb. Grateful for scraps. Too scared to fight back because I've got kids to feed." Victor leaned back in his chair, studying me. "What do you want from me, Zane?" "A job, a good one, and complete discretion about the timing." "You planning something?" I met his eyes. "I'm planning to give Callum exactly what he deserves." Victor was quiet for a long moment, then he smiled. It was the kind of smile that had probably terrified competitors for years. "What did you have in mind?" "The Hartwell patents, the Morrison client list, the entire Southeast expansion strategy." I ticked off items on my fingers. All of it sitting in my head, none of it covered by a non-compete clause because Callum was too arrogant to think I'd ever leave. "That's worth considerable compensation. I'm not looking for charity. I'm looking for justice. Pay me what I'm worth, give me the resources to do my job, and I'll hand you Torven Industries on a silver platter. Victor's smile widened. When can you start? I need 2 weeks. Time to arrange things properly. Done. He stood, extending his hand. Welcome to Meridian, Zane. I think this is going to be very interesting. That evening, I made a stop at Murphy's Tavern, a dimly lit bar 3 blocks from Torven Industries. It was the kind of place where corporate types went to drink away their stress and share gossip they'd never repeat in the office. The bartender, Nash, had worked there for 15 years and had a memory like a steel trap. Zane! Nash looked surprised to see me. Don't usually see you in here on weeknights. Rough day? Bourbon? Neat? He poured the drink, studying my face. Heard there were some changes happening up at Torven. Layoffs, restructuring, that kind of thing. You hear a lot in this job, don't you, Nash? People talk, especially after a few drinks. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Word is, some folks are getting squeezed pretty hard. Folks with families, folks who can't afford to fight back. I sipped my bourbon, letting the burn settle in my chest. What else do people talk about? Nash glanced around, making sure no one was listening. Well, there's been some interesting developments in the Torven family. Tess has been coming in here pretty regular lately, always with the same guy. My grip tightened on the glass. Same guy? Declan Shaw. You know him? Works in corporate relations at Torven. Real smooth talker, drives one of those fancy European cars. Declan Shaw. I knew the name. Callum's protégé, his golden boy. Young, ambitious, and apparently not too concerned about sleeping with his boss's married daughter. They seem... close? I asked. Nash snorted. Close enough that they've been sharing more than drinks, if you catch my meaning. Last week she was practically sitting in his lap. Week before that, they left together and she forgot her purse. Had to come back for it the next morning. The next morning. While I was at work, while the kids were at school, Tess and Declan were playing house. Thanks for the drink, Nash. I left a 20 on the bar, twice what the bourbon cost. Anytime, Zane. And hey, if you ever need to talk, you know where to find me. I drove home slowly, my mind working through the implications. Tess and Declan weren't just having an affair, they were flaunting it, at least to anyone who cared to look. Which meant they felt safe, protected. But protection was a funny thing. It only worked as long as the person providing it had power. And Callum's power was about to take a serious hit. At home, I found Riley doing homework at the kitchen table, while Jake and Emma watched TV in the living room. Normal family evening, the kind of scene that made all the corporate games seem trivial. How was school? I asked, kissing the top of Riley's head. Good. We're learning about the Revolutionary War. Did you know Benedict Arnold was a hero before he became a traitor? Is that so? Yeah. He was really brave and smart. But then he got angry about how he was being treated, so he switched sides. She looked up at me with serious eyes. Mrs. Patterson says sometimes good people do bad things when they're pushed too far. Out of the mouths of babes. That's very wise, sweetheart. Dad, are we going to be okay? I heard you on the phone last night, and you sounded worried. I knelt down beside her chair, taking her small hands in mine. We're going to be fine, Riley. Better than fine. Sometimes things have to get worse before they get better, but I promise you, we're going to be okay. She smiled, trusting me completely. I know. You always take care of us. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, I sat in my home office and started making lists. Assets, contacts, strategies. The scarf was still in my desk drawer, evidence of Tess's carelessness. But I needed more than one mistake. I needed a pattern. I opened my laptop and started going through old emails, bank statements, credit card bills from when we were still married. Tess had always been careful with money. Too careful, maybe. But people in love make mistakes. They get sloppy. Sure enough, there it was. A pattern of expenses that didn't match her official income. Designer clothes, expensive dinners, weekend trips to places I'd never been. All charged to credit cards I'd never seen, all paid off mysteriously at the end of each month. Someone was bankrolling her lifestyle, someone with deep pockets and a vested interest in keeping her happy. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Saw you at Murphy's tonight. We should talk. D. Declan. Apparently, Nash wasn't the only one who'd noticed my visit to the bar. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, tomorrow, parking garage, level B, noon. His response came immediately. See you there. I set the phone aside and returned to my lists. By the time I went to bed, I had the outline of a plan that would have made Benedict Arnold proud. Sometimes good people do bad things when they're pushed too far, and I was about to be pushed very far indeed. The parking garage at Torven Industries was a concrete tomb, all shadows and echoes. Level B was the deepest, where the executives parked their expensive toys away from prying eyes. I arrived 10 minutes early, positioning myself near the elevator where I could see anyone coming. Declan Shaw stepped out of the elevator at exactly noon, looking around nervously. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with the kind of polished good looks that probably made him popular with certain types of women. His suit was expensive, his shoes Italian leather, his watch worth more than most people made in a month. Zane. He approached cautiously, like he wasn't sure whether I was going to shake his hand or punch him in the face. Declan. I kept my voice neutral, professional. Thanks for meeting me. Look, I know this is awkward, but I think we should clear the air. Do you? I stepped closer, watching him tense up. What exactly do you think needs clearing? He tried to maintain his composure, but sweat was beading on his forehead. Tess and we're friends, that's all. I know how it might look, but how it might look. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. It looks like you're sleeping with my ex-wife while her father tries to destroy my career. How exactly should that look? You don't understand. Callum doesn't know about... He caught himself, realizing he'd just confirmed what I'd suspected. Doesn't know about what, Declan? His face went pale. Nothing. Look, maybe this was a mistake. He turned to walk away, but I grabbed his arm, spinning him back around. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to get his attention. We're not done talking. Let go of me. His voice cracked slightly. I released him, but didn't step back. Here's what's going to happen, Declan. You're going to stay away from Tess. You're going to stay away from my kids. And you're going to pray that I don't decide to have a conversation with Callum about his daughter's extracurricular activities. You can't prove anything. I pulled out my phone, showing him the photo of the scarf. Can I? His eyes widened. That doesn't prove... It proves she was in my house, with someone. Someone who wears expensive cologne and has poor judgment. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Want to bet Callum won't put the pieces together when I show him this? Declan's hands were shaking now. What do you want? I want you to remember that I'm not some helpless victim you and the Torven family can push around. I'm someone who pays attention, someone who remembers. I smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. Someone who doesn't forgive. I walked away, leaving him standing there in the shadows. But I wasn't done with Declan Shaw, not by a long shot. That afternoon, I put the second phase of my plan into motion. The contracts with Meridian were already signed, buried in paperwork that wouldn't surface until it was too late. But I needed more than just a new job. I needed leverage. I spent the next week quietly documenting everything: client contacts, project files, strategic plans. All of it legally mine to take, thanks to Callum's arrogance in not updating my employment contract. He'd been so confident in his control over me that he'd never bothered with the legal details. Meanwhile, I started planting seeds, casual conversations with other employees about the company's financial stability, questions about the wisdom of Callum's recent decisions. Nothing direct, nothing that could be traced back to me, but enough to create doubt. Nash at Murphy's Tavern proved to be an invaluable ally. The corporate gossip network flowed through that bar like water, and Nash was the dam that controlled the flow. A word here, a suggestion there, and soon the rumors were spreading on their own. Heard Tess Torven's been living pretty high lately, someone would say. Where's that money coming from? Someone else would wonder. Doesn't she work for some nonprofit? Those jobs don't pay much. Maybe she's got other sources of income. The beauty of corporate gossip was that it didn't need to be true to be damaging. It just needed to be plausible. And Tess's lifestyle was definitely plausible evidence of financial irregularities. By the end of the week, I was ready for the next phase. I called Victor Hale from my car, parked outside the kids' school, while I waited for pickup. The transition is ready, I told him. How quickly can you move? How quickly do you need me to move? Monday morning, I want them to walk into the office and find out their biggest accounts are gone. That's aggressive. You sure you want to burn bridges that thoroughly? I watched Riley, Jake, and Emma walking toward the car, their faces bright with the simple joy of seeing their father. The bridges are already burned, Victor. I'm just making sure everyone can see the flames. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood perfectly. I dressed carefully, my best suit, the one Tess had bought me for our anniversary 3 years ago, seemed appropriate. The office was buzzing with nervous energy when I arrived. People were huddled in small groups, whispering. The rumor mill had been working overtime all weekend. Callum's secretary called at 9:15. Mr. Torven would like to see you in his office immediately. I took my time walking to the executive floor, savoring the moment. Callum's office was a monument to ego. Mahogany paneling, leather furniture, oil paintings of long-gone ancestors who'd probably never worked a day in their lives. Sit down, Zane. Callum's voice was tight with controlled anger. I remained standing. I prefer to stand. The Henderson account is gone. Morrison Industries terminated their contract this morning. The entire Southeast Division is in chaos. He stood up, leaning across his desk. What did you do? I resigned. I placed a letter on his desk, typed on expensive paper just like the contract he'd given me. Effective immediately. His face went purple. You can't do this. You have obligations, contracts. Actually, I don't. You never updated my employment agreement after the divorce. Legally, I can take any knowledge or contacts I had prior to joining Torven Industries. I smiled. Your lawyers might want to look into that. You're making a mistake, Zane. A big one. The only mistake I made was trusting your family. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and Callum. You might want to have a conversation with your daughter about her spending habits. People are starting to ask questions. I walked out, leaving him speechless for probably the first time in his life. The rest of the day was a blur of phone calls, angry emails, and frantic meetings I was no longer required to attend. By 5 o'clock, the news had spread throughout the building. Zane Merrinor was gone, and he'd taken half the company's revenue with him. But the best part was still to come. Tess called me that evening, her voice shrill with panic. What have you done? Hello to you too, Tess. How was your day? Don't play games with me, Zane. Daddy says you stole clients, that you've destroyed everything. I didn't steal anything. I took what was legally mine. I was in my kitchen, making dinner for the kids while she ranted. Normal life continuing despite the chaos I'd unleashed. You're being vindictive and petty. This affects the children too, you know. If the company suffers, the children will be fine. They have a father who actually cares about their welfare. What's that supposed to mean? I set down the wooden spoon I'd been using to stir pasta sauce. It means I know about Declan, Tess. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. Just like you don't know how you've been affording that condo, or those designer clothes, or those weekend trips to places we never went when we were married. That's none of your business anymore. It becomes my business when it affects my children, when it affects custody arrangements, when it affects their mother's ability to provide a stable home environment. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You can't prove anything. Can I? I pulled the scarf from my pocket, even though she couldn't see it. You left something behind last week. Something that smells very interesting. Another long silence. What do you want? I want you to stop playing games. I want you to stop using our children as pawns. And I want you to remember that I'm not the same man you walked out on 2 years ago. I hung up before she could respond. The next morning brought news that made my coffee taste even better than usual. Nash called from the bar, his voice excited. You need to get down here, Zane. The whole Torven crowd is in meltdown mode. I found Nash polishing glasses with the satisfied air of someone who'd just witnessed a spectacular car crash. Callum was in here until 2 a.m., he said, drinking scotch and making phone calls, loud phone calls. Apparently, the board is asking some very pointed questions about recent financial decisions. What kind of questions? The kind that involve auditors and lawyers. Word is, they're looking into all executive compensation packages, including family members. That was interesting. I'd hoped the rumors about Tess's spending would create problems, but I hadn't expected the board to move so quickly. There's more, Nash continued. Declan Shaw was here too, looking like someone had run over his dog. He was asking questions about you, when you'd been in, who you'd talked to, that sort of thing. What did you tell him? Nothing useful, but he seemed pretty worried about something. I bet he was. Declan's position at Torven Industries depended entirely on Callum's protection. If Callum was under pressure from the board, that protection might not be as reliable as it once was. That afternoon, I got a call from my lawyer, Jim Morrison, no relation to the client I'd taken to Meridian. Zane, I just got off the phone with Tess's attorney. They want to discuss modifying the custody arrangement. What kind of modifications? They're claiming you're mentally unstable due to work-related stress. They want to reduce your parenting time until you can prove you're fit to care for the children. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. On what grounds? They claim you've been making threats, exhibiting erratic behavior, engaging in corporate espionage. Jim's voice was carefully neutral. They also claim you've been stalking Tess. That's ridiculous. I know it is, but they've got documentation. Emails, phone records, witness statements. Witness statements from whom? Someone named Declan Shaw, for one. I closed my eyes, feeling the trap closing around me. Tess and Declan weren't just having an affair. They were working together to destroy me, and they'd been planning it for longer than I'd realized. Jim, I need you to do something for me. I need you to hire a private investigator. Someone good, someone discreet. What kind of investigation? Financial records, phone records, travel records, everything you can legally get on Tess and Declan Shaw for the past 6 months. That's going to be expensive. I don't care what it costs. My kids are worth it. 3 days later, Jim called back with news that changed everything. Your instincts were right, Zane. The investigator found some very interesting connections. What kind of connections? Financial ones. Tess has been receiving monthly payments from a shell company for the past 8 months. Guess who owns that shell company? Declan Shaw. Bingo. But it gets better. The shell company is funded by consulting fees from Torven Industries. Declan's been using company money to support his girlfriend, and the girlfriend happens to be the boss's daughter. I felt a smile spreading across my face. That's embezzlement. At minimum. Possibly fraud, depending on how the consulting contracts were structured. Jim's voice was grim with satisfaction. But here's the really interesting part. Some of those payments were made while you and Tess were still married. Technically, that makes it marital property. Which means? Which means Tess owes you half of everything Declan gave her. And since it was stolen money to begin with, both of them could be facing serious legal consequences. I leaned back in my chair, feeling pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Jim, I need you to prepare a comprehensive filing, divorce modification, custody revision, financial recovery, the works. When do you want to file? Tomorrow morning. And Jim? Make sure copies go to Callum Torven and the Torven Industries Board of Directors. They should know what their golden boy has been up to. This is going to get ugly, Zane. It's been ugly for a long time. Now it's going to get honest. That evening, I sat down with Riley, Jake, and Emma for what I knew would be a difficult conversation. Kids, we need to talk about some grown-up stuff that's been happening. Riley looked up from her homework, her face serious. Is it about Mom? Partly. There are going to be some changes, some legal stuff that might be confusing or scary. But I want you to know that no matter what happens, you're safe, you're loved, and I'm going to take care of you. Jake, who was only 8 but had always been perceptive, asked, Is Mom in trouble? Mom made some choices that weren't very good. Now she has to deal with the consequences of those choices. Like when I broke Emma's toy and had to use my allowance to buy her a new one? Exactly like that, buddy, except the grown-up version is more complicated. Emma, who was 6 and still believed the world was basically fair, asked, Will she say she's sorry? I looked at my youngest daughter's trusting face and felt my heart break a little. I don't know, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups have a hard time saying they're sorry, even when they should. That's silly, Emma declared. Saying sorry makes everything better. If only it were that simple. But some things couldn't be fixed with apologies. Some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt. And some people, once they showed you who they really were, didn't deserve forgiveness. The call came at 6 a.m. on a Thursday. Callum's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. You've made a serious mistake, Zane. Good morning to you too, Callum. How's the family? The board met in emergency session last night. They want answers about Declan's consulting contracts, about Tess's income, about a lot of things that used to be private family matters. I poured myself coffee, taking my time. That must be uncomfortable for you. This isn't over. You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've started. Actually, I think I'm finishing something that started when you tried to cut my salary by 68%. Funny how these things come full circle. The children will suffer for this. You realize that, don't you? When their mother's reputation is destroyed, when their grandfather's company collapses, they'll be the ones who pay the price. I felt anger flare in my chest. Don't you dare try to make this about the kids. You should have thought about them before you declared war on their father. I could destroy you with one phone call. Go ahead, try. I kept my voice calm, reasonable. But remember, Callum, I'm not the one who's been embezzling company funds to pay for my daughter's lifestyle. The line went quiet. When Callum spoke again, his voice was different. Smaller. What do you want? I want you to leave me alone. I want you to leave my children alone. And I want Declan Shaw out of our lives permanently. Declan's already been terminated. The board insisted. That was faster than I'd expected. Good. What about Tess? Tess is dealing with some financial difficulties. The board froze her trust fund pending a full audit. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She made her choices, Callum. She's still the mother of your children. Yes, she is. And when she's ready to act like it, we can discuss custody arrangements. Until then, the kids stay with me. I hung up and went to wake the children for school. Normal morning routine, the kind of stability they needed while their world shifted around them. But Tess wasn't done fighting. That afternoon, I got a call from the school principal. Mr. Merrinor, we have a situation. Tess came to pick up the children, claiming there was a family emergency. When we asked for documentation of her custody rights, she became agitated. I was already grabbing my keys. Are the kids safe? They're fine, they're in my office, but Tess is demanding to see them, and she's making quite a scene in the lobby. I made it to the school in record time. Through the glass doors, I could see Tess pacing in the lobby, her designer clothes wrinkled, her usually perfect hair disheveled. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. The principal, Mrs. Chen, met me at the door. She's been here for an hour, insisting that you're unfit to care for the children. She claims you've been threatening her, that you're mentally unstable. Where are Riley, Jake, and Emma? Safe in my office with the counselor. They're confused and a little scared, but they're okay. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Let me talk to her. Tess spun around when I entered the lobby, her eyes wild. There you are. Tell them, Zane. Tell them I have a right to see my children. You do have a right to see them. During your scheduled visitation times, with proper notice following the custody agreement. The custody agreement is changing. My lawyer says, your lawyer is about to have bigger problems to worry about. I kept my voice calm, aware that school staff were watching. Tess, you need to go home. The kids are fine, they're safe, and they're staying with me. You can't do this. You can't turn them against me. I'm not turning them against anyone, but I'm not going to let you use them as weapons either. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. You think you've won? You think destroying my life makes you some kind of hero? I think protecting my children makes me their father, something you forgot how to be. Her hand came up like she was going to slap me, but I caught her wrist gently but firmly. Don't, I said quietly. Not here. Not in front of their school. She jerked away from me, tears streaming down her face. For a moment, I saw a glimpse of the woman I'd married, the woman I'd loved. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone desperate and dangerous. This isn't over, she whispered. Yes, it is. She left without another word, her heels clicking across the lobby floor like gunshots. Mrs. Chen appeared at my elbow. The children can stay in my office until you're ready to take them home. Thank you. And Mrs. Chen, if Tess comes back, call the police first, then call me. Already noted in her file. That evening, I sat the kids down for another difficult conversation. Riley, as usual, was the first to speak. Mom looked really sad today. She is sad, sweetheart. She's going through a hard time. Is it our fault? Jake asked. No, buddy. It's not your fault. It's not my fault. And it's not really Mom's fault either. Sometimes adults make bad choices, and those choices have consequences that hurt everyone. Will she get better? Emma wanted to know. I looked at my youngest daughter's hopeful face and chose my words carefully. I don't know. I hope so. But even if she doesn't, you three are going to be okay. We're going to be okay. Because you'll take care of us, Riley said. It wasn't a question. Always, I promised. No matter what. 2 weeks later, the legal proceedings were finalized. Tess's trust fund remained frozen pending criminal investigation. Declan Shaw had fled the state, leaving behind debts and a reputation in ruins. Callum had been forced to step down from his position at Torven Industries, though he'd managed to avoid criminal charges. And I had full custody of my children, with Tess granted supervised visitation once she completed court-mandated counseling. Victor Hale called me into his office on a Friday afternoon, a bottle of expensive whiskey on his desk between us. The Torven acquisition went through this morning, he said, pouring 2 glasses. Congratulations. You just helped me buy your former employer for 30 cents on the dollar. I accepted the glass, but didn't drink. What happens to the employees? Most of them keep their jobs, the good ones anyway. We'll need experienced people to run the division. And Callum? Callum gets to retire with his pension intact and his reputation only slightly tattered. More mercy than he showed you. I finally took a sip of the whiskey. It was smooth, expensive, satisfying. Sometimes mercy is its own kind of revenge. Victor laughed. You've got a twisted sense of justice, Zane. I like that in an employee. That evening, I picked up the kids from their after-school programs and took them out for pizza. Normal family dinner, the kind we'd been having more often lately. Riley was telling me about her upcoming piano recital, Jake was excited about his soccer team making the playoffs, and Emma was planning her Halloween costume. Dad, Riley said as we walked to the car, are you happy now? I looked at my 3 children, healthy and safe and loved, and felt something settle in my chest. Peace, maybe, or just the absence of war. Yeah, sweetheart, I'm happy now. Good, she said, taking my hand. You deserve to be happy. Out of the mouths of babes. Maybe she was right. Maybe I did deserve happiness. Maybe we all did. As we drove home through the October evening, I thought about Benedict Arnold and the Revolutionary War, about bridges burned and battles won. Sometimes good people do bad things when they're pushed too far, but sometimes, when the smoke clears and the dust settles, they find out they were fighting for something worth keeping all along. The mahogany ultimatum was over, and for the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged.